Imagine the scene. I'm driving my horse trailer along the gravel path to my family's ranch. Having been away for 4 months in Washington, D.C., when the Texas twilight is suddenly cut by flashing red and blue lights, my entrance is obstructed by 3 police cruisers, and standing right there is Karen Whitmore. Her arms are folded, and a triumphant grin is fixed on her face, as if she's just hit the jackpot. She is literally hopping on the balls of her feet just behind the officers. A deputy walks toward my truck, holding his hat, with an expression that suggests he'd prefer to be on another planet. "Sir, we've received a report of trespassing. This woman claims you are not supposed to be here." I shift my gaze to Karen, then to the wrought iron sign that reads White Hawk Ranch, Est, 1887. And finally back to this individual who took up residence in the new subdivision a mere 3 months ago. The scent of diesel fumes mixes with the aroma of sagebrush. In a distant pasture, cattle are lowing. "Officer," I state calmly, "allow me to introduce you to the person who just called law enforcement on the man who supervises every HOA in the United States." Karen's victorious smile dissolves like ice cream on a hot August day. What would you do if an HOA busybody attempted to have you arrested on your own ancestral land? Post your most dreadful HOA experience below and let me know your viewing location. Permit me to rewind and explain the circumstances that led to this moment. My name is Garrett Whitehawk, and 4 months prior, I laid my father to rest on this very Texas land that his grandfather first tilled with a plow in 1887. The property encompasses 2,400 acres of rolling hills, mesquite trees, and the most reputable cattle operation in Millfield County. However, my father bequeathed to me more than just the property. You see, while managing cattle and mending fences, I had also been advancing my career within the Federal Housing Administration. After my father passed away, I was summoned to Washington, D.C., for a promotion to Regional Oversight Director for the Federal Housing Authority. My responsibility was to ensure that homeowners associations across a 5-state region adhered to legal standards. The situation was poised to become exquisitely ironic. While I was in D.C., learning the intricacies of investigating corrupt HOA boards and fraudulent development schemes, my foreman, Buck Henley, was managing our new neighbors, Sagebrush Estates, a high-end subdivision promoted as an authentic Western living experience. In reality, this meant California transplants paying exorbitant prices to reside next to actual cowboys, only to subsequently complain about all the elements that made it authentic. This is where Karen Whitmore enters the picture. 48 years old, recently arrived from some HOA conflict in San Diego, who designated herself the neighborhood compliance coordinator before her moving truck was even empty. Buck's description of her was flawless. She possesses the vigor of a caffeinated chihuahua, with double the aggression and roughly half the intelligence. During her first week, Karen conducted twice daily drives past our ranch equipped with a measuring tape, a clipboard, and the unwavering resolve of a health inspector in a dilapidated motel. Buck observed her taking pictures of our cattle through the fence, even recording notes on their defecation habits as if she were composing a doctoral thesis on bovine waste management. The complaints began to flow almost immediately. Formal complaint letters were accumulating more quickly than droppings in a cattle yard. Excessive agricultural odors. Apparently, cow manure does not smell like roses. Unsightly equipment storage, because tractors are so disagreeable to look at. Noise violations from livestock operations. Who would have thought that cows moo? All of these were submitted to Millfield County by concerned citizens, which was a euphemism for Karen and any neighbor she had managed to bully into compliance. Buck provided me with updates via crackly phone connections to D.C. "Boss, this woman is chronicling everything. She's got timestamps for our feeding routine. She's measuring dust plumes with some high-tech gadget. And she even reported to the county that our access road infringes on her property setbacks. And here is the most beautiful part of the story. Her residence is situated a mere 50 feet from our fence line. Our cattle road has existed since the era of Sam Houston. Yet, all of a sudden, it was deemed a traffic nuisance incompatible with her residential character. I returned home to find 17 complaint letters and had a rather unforgettable first meeting at Kowalski's feed store. The smell of grain dust and leather oil welcomed me like a comforting embrace. Then, Karen cornered me near the horse supplements, offering a manicured hand as though we were being introduced at an upscale charity event. "You must be Mr. Whitehawk. I am Karen Whitmore, Community Standards Advocate for Sagebrush Estates. Her smile was composed of porcelain veneers and lacked any genuine warmth. "We absolutely must have a discussion about modernizing your operations to align with our neighborhood's aesthetic." In the background, old Marty Kowalski feigned arranging salt licks, clearly relishing the unfolding drama. The sound of my boots crunching on spilled feed seemed to echo in the abrupt quiet. "Ma'am," I responded, my voice as serene as a Sunday morning. "This ranch has been standing since long before your neighborhood was even a glimmer in a developer's eye." "Oh, I have a complete appreciation for the historical significance," she chirped, her tone condescending, as if explaining basic arithmetic to a young child. "But circumstances evolve, property values, you understand. I possess considerable experience in municipal compliance and have valuable contacts in county planning. I am certain we can devise solutions that benefit all parties." The manner in which she uttered the word solutions made her true meaning surrender abundantly clear. For a full 20 minutes, she expounded on community harmony and suitable land use while I purchased minerals for my cattle and listened to her outline a redesign of my family's century-old enterprise. She never once inquired about our heritage, our legal standing, or whether we were the least bit concerned about her social engagements. She simply presumed we would acquiesce because Queen Karen had decreed it. That evening, I was seated on the porch where 4 generations of white hawks had observed storms advancing over these hills. Lightning flashed distantly, and I could sense the approaching rain in the air, a metallic and electric taste. The county had set a date for a neighborhood compatibility hearing based on Karen's grievances. She was demanding that our cattle road be rerouted, our machinery be shielded from residential sightlines, and our feeding times be altered to suit her social life. I took a sip of bourbon and smiled. A storm was indeed on its way. Karen Whitmore just wasn't aware that she had initiated a conflict with the one individual in the country who could dissolve her entire HOA with a single phone call. Karen wasted no time. In less than a week, she had evolved from a lone grievant into the commander of a 3-person force. The Sagebrush Estates Property Values Committee? It sounds quite formal, doesn't it? Her deputies were Bryce Kellerman, a retired bank manager who guarded his pennies as if they were a critically endangered species, and Donna Hutchkins, a former Phoenix City Council member who had relocated to Texas to get away from the exact kind of bureaucracy she had been instrumental in building. They convened their inaugural emergency session at Karen's kitchen table, equipped with coordinated folders and a PowerPoint presentation titled Agricultural Operations Impact Assessment. "I'm being completely serious." Buck security footage recorded Bryce showing up with a laser pointer and a portable projection screen, as if they were orchestrating the D-Day landing instead of merely bothering a cattle ranch. Then came the wonderful twist of irony. Karen opted to look me up online and discovered my federal role as a regional oversight director. But this is the detail that made me laugh into my coffee one morning. She completely misconstrued my duties. She imagined I was some sort of unethical government official responsible for overseeing ranch inspections and championing agricultural interests. "Excellent," she declared to her committee, her voice drifting on the evening breeze to Buck's listening position. "He's clearly prejudiced in favor of ranchers. We will bypass him and go directly to Washington. I have contacts in municipal planning." If only she had realized those contacts were about to take a keen interest in her own HOA's compliance problems. While Karen was scheming for my professional ruin, I was methodically preparing her legal downfall. Sarah Olivia, my lawyer, conducted a title search that unearthed something delightful. I recalled my grandfather detailing these safeguards when I was just 12, as I watched him in a dispute with some now-forgotten developer. Agricultural easements serve as permanent legal fortifications that shield established farm operations from subsequent residential complaints. Each noise complaint Karen submitted was, in fact, fortifying our position by providing a record of our long-standing activities. The concept is straightforward. You cannot choose to live adjacent to a farm and then protest the act of farming. The truly valuable discovery, however, was in Karen's past addresses, which showed a pattern more distinct than cattle hoofprints in soft earth. 3 states, for different communities, and identical disputes with neighbors. I placed a call to her previous neighbor in San Diego. "Oh dear Lord, you've got Karen?" Mrs. Rodriguez chuckled until she snorted. "She tried to have our mariachi band arrested for cultural noise violations. She called immigration on our gardener. She filed 17 complaints about our dogs barking. We own a cat." Karen's efforts intensified magnificently. She retained a law firm from Austin that specialized in nuisance abatement, a sophisticated term for legal intimidation. The scent of high-priced legal trouble emanated from their demand letter like a cloud of expensive cologne. They made threats of lawsuits over reduced property values and insisted on an immediate halt to all incompatible agricultural activities. Her project of documentation escalated to a fanatical degree. Karen used a decibel meter to measure noise levels during our 6 a.m. feeding schedule, the device's electronic chirps resounding across the pasture like a bizarre alarm clock. She took photographs of every cowpat located within 50 yards of her property line. Buck saw her perched on a stepladder, capturing aerial views of our equipment yard as if she were carrying out military reconnaissance. The local community came together more rapidly than horses drawn to a feed bucket. Marty Kowalski prohibited Karen from entering his feed store after she insisted on inspecting our delivery vehicles. Rita Sandoval, the proprietor of the county's finest diner, informed Karen that her proposed dress code for patrons could be filed in a location where sunlight is scarce. That woman, Rita remarked, pushing a coffee mug across the worn Formica counter, objected to my chicken and dumplings, calling them too ethnically aromatic. In Texas, that level of nerve could suffocate a horse. The clang of Rita's coffee pot on the burner served as an exclamation point to her contempt. Much like a judge's gavel, Karen's legal representatives raised the stakes with their first formal demand. Cease all cattle operations within 200 yards of residential properties, move the equipment storage area, and construct sound-dampening barriers for livestock enclosures. The estimated cost for these ranch alterations, intended to appease neighbors who had knowingly moved next to a pre-existing operation, was $340,000. She launched a Facebook page named Millfield County Rural Reform, where she posted professionally shot pictures as evidence of our transgressions. Half of her images depicted routine ranch work that had been lawful since before Texas achieved statehood. The other half showed our cattle engaged in groundbreaking activities such as consuming grass and simply being cows. The situation reached its most entertaining point when Karen began measuring the height of our fence with a surveyor's rod, ostensibly to document potential sightline violations. Bessie, our friendliest heifer, ambled over to see what this peculiar human was doing. Karen let out a shriek as if she had come face to face with a grizzly bear and sprinted to her SUV, deserting her pricey equipment in her haste. "Boss?" Buck reported in a phone call, trying to suppress his laughter. "I have footage of our neighbor being pursued by a 1,000-pound cow that was just trying to be neighborly. This is far better than anything on cable." The county scheduled our neighborhood compatibility hearing for the following month. Karen was certain that her collection of charts, graphs, and a multimedia presentation would establish our ranch as an outdated nuisance, unsuited for contemporary residential life. What she was unaware of was that I had already conferred with Marcus Webb, the county planning director and an old fishing companion of my father's. Marcus examined our agricultural easement and laughed so hard that coffee shot out of his nose. "Garrett, this woman's complaints are legally void. Your protections are a century older than her subdivision. But go ahead and let her have the hearing. It might prove to be an enlightening experience for everyone." Karen believed she was constructing a case against us. In reality, she was creating a perfect record of why agricultural protections are necessary and why HOAs cannot supersede property rights that are a century old. Karen's campaign went into high gear. She introduced Millfield County Rural Reform with a polished website that displayed sensationalized images of our ranch activities. Cattle grazing, it seemed, was considered a form of visual pollution in her view. She reached out to Channel 7 to complain about outdated agricultural exemptions that were harming innocent homeowners and initiated a petition to mandate ranch modernization requirements. The woman was certainly diligent. I'll admit that she managed to find our property tax filings and submitted a grievance alleging that the ranch was undervalued in comparison to residential lots. The smell of bureaucratic interference filled the air, as thick as diesel smoke on a windless morning. However, this is where Karen's amateur investigative efforts backfired in a grand way. She learned that I held the mineral rights to a section of her beloved subdivision. A piece of information that is publicly available if one knows the right place to search. In Texas, it's common for mineral rights to remain with the original landowners, even after the surface land has been developed. Karen thought this discovery would give her leverage against me and threatened to report a conflict of interest to my superiors in the federal government. She was completely oblivious to the fact that possessing mineral rights actually fortified my legal standing, while her complaints were simultaneously constructing a compelling case of harassment against her. It was almost painful to witness someone digging their own legal grave with such fervor. I handled the situation with the composure my grandfather had taught me for managing anxious cattle. Calm, consistent, and tactical, Sarah Olivia started to compile a record of Karen's harassment for a possible restraining order. I carried on with my federal HOA oversight training via online courses, picking up interesting facts about communities that had neglected their development responsibilities. The ranching community came together as good neighbors do. The Ranchers Association extended an offer of legal aid, although we had not yet needed it. The FFA chapter at Millfield High School composed a letter in favor of our operations. Those teenagers have a better grasp of agriculture than many adults. The Chamber of Commerce endorsed a resolution in support of agricultural heritage, and 3 residents from the subdivision personally came to apologize, making it clear they were not part of Karen's campaign. Karen's subsequent action demonstrated just how out of touch she was with Texas law. She tried to have our ranch designated a public nuisance by petitioning the city council, seemingly ignorant of the fact that Millfield's city limits were 2 miles away from our property. The public meeting where she laid out her case to a baffled council is now a local legend. "Ma'am," the mayor clarified with gentle patience, "we don't have authority over county land. It might be beneficial for you to look into municipal jurisdictions before you file any more petitions." A collective sigh was almost tangible in the room, yet Karen persisted, asserting that I was cowing residents with threatening behavior. The evidence she presented was security footage of cattle placidly grazing in our field. In the meantime, Sarah Olivia's research brought something wonderful to light. The subdivision's developer had taken shortcuts on the environmental impact assessments, and the initial permits had mandated a 200-foot agricultural buffer that was never put in place. Karen's house was situated just 50 feet from our property line, in direct violation of the original development terms. Even better, the county inspector identified numerous HOA violations throughout sagebrush estates. Unpermitted fences, problems with drainage, and structures that surpassed the allowed height. It turned out that Karen's own community was facing more significant legal issues than the smell of cow manure. The irony continued to accumulate. In one of my federal training seminars on municipal compliance, I discovered that HOAs overseeing developments constructed with any form of federal funding or tax breaks are subject to our oversight jurisdiction. A brief search of the records confirmed that Sagebrush Estates had, in fact, received such benefits during its construction phase. Karen arranged a community meeting at the subdivision's clubhouse to showcase her evidence against our ranch, extending invitations to local media without seeking the approval of other residents. The prospect of imminent justice was more delightful than Rita's peach cobbler. Buck's security cameras documented Karen's daily reconnaissance efforts, photographing our cattle through the fence, using handheld instruments to measure dust, and recording our feeding times as if she were gearing up for a battle. "She's at it again," Buck informed me one morning. "Taking pictures of the bulls? I'm telling you, she has more files on our cattle than the Department of Agriculture does." The community meeting unfolded with all the theatricality Karen could have wished for, though not in the way she had envisioned. 15 residents were in attendance, their presence driven more by curiosity than by any real support for her cause. Karen delivered her slideshow, complete with dramatic background music and professionally designed graphics, outlining every supposed infraction our century-old ranch had committed against her 3-month-old sensibilities. Then I made my entrance, uninvited, yet fully entitled to be there as a county resident. Karen's expression shifted through stages of surprise, fury, and alarm as I systematically refuted each of her claims with verifiable facts and legal support. "Mrs. Whitmore," I stated, positioned near the entrance of the room, "you are demanding that a 150-year-old ranch alter its practices for a subdivision that was constructed just 3 months ago. That is akin to moving in next to an airport and then lodging a complaint about the sound of airplanes." Several residents began to ask probing questions regarding Karen's past disputes with neighbors. Her backing dwindled more quickly than dew in the August sun. The county planning office declared that it would be conducting a review of the subdivision's permit compliance, a process set in motion by the very complaints Karen herself had submitted. At times, the most effective form of retribution is to simply allow someone to become entangled in their own machinations. Karen came to understand that her media outreach had backfired, her legal warnings were ineffective, and her own community was now turning on her. however, much like a cornered animal. This was the point at which she would become her most unpredictable. The real entertainment was only just starting. Karen's desperation drove her to the investigative team at Channel 7 with a story proposal that would have made Hollywood screenwriters envious. Federal employee exploits position to harass neighbors. She supplied them with selectively edited videos of our ranch activities, highlighting dust plumes and the sounds of early morning feeding, while asserting that she was speaking for dozens of distressed families in her battle against governmental wrongdoing. The scent of her own rising fear must have been potent, because Karen was making one amateurish error after another. This is where her attempt to use the media backfired spectacularly. Like a misfired firework, the reporter, Jake Morrison, began to dig into the story, but instead of concentrating on supposed ranch violations, he unearthed Karen's history of neighbor conflicts stretching across 3 different states. The narrative transformed from problem rancher harasses subdivision to problem neighbor targets long-standing agricultural operation. Morrison discovered building permit infringements throughout sagebrush estates, documented Karen's history of harassment complaints, and spoke with former neighbors who described a person who had made a habit of creating conflict. When he contacted me for an interview, I knew it was my opportunity to enlighten the public about a more significant issue. I clarified my actual federal capacity, HOA supervision, not ranch inspections, and furnished him with proof of Karen's escalating harassment. The timing was ideal. I brought up my forthcoming address to a congressional subcommittee concerning HOA accountability and proposed federal reforms. Karen's reaction was one of sheer panic. Recognizing that her media plan had backfired disastrously, she tried to mitigate the damage by asserting she was safeguarding community values against governmental intrusion. She convened an emergency HOA board meeting to alter the subdivision's bylaws and put forward a special assessment to cover the costs of legal proceedings against our ranch. The community meeting evolved into a textbook example of how to alienate people and lose influence. Karen delivered her slideshow on ranch violations with the gravity of a capital murder trial, featuring ominous music and red arrows aimed at our cattle as if they were pieces of criminal evidence. I appeared without an invitation, which was perfectly within my rights as a county resident, and methodically refuted every assertion with facts and evidence. When Karen alleged that our cattle were causing excessive noise pollution, I noted that her own decibel meter readings indicated levels quieter than a standard suburban lawnmower. "Mrs. Whitmore," I stated, the room falling silent except for the drone of the overhead lights. "Based on your own data, our cattle produce 45 decibels at feeding time. Your neighbor's leaf blower reaches 70 decibels every Saturday." Some residents started posing awkward questions about Karen's prior legal battles. It turned out that people are not fond of being duped into potential lawsuits that could result in thousands of dollars in special assessments. In the meantime, my own inquiry into the subdivision's compliance was yielding some interesting findings. Sarah Olivia learned that when the original developer went out of business, all permit responsibilities were passed on to the HOA. This included $340,000 in uncompleted environmental compliance tasks that Karen's board was now legally obligated to finish. The subdivision's HOA had no legal grounds to contest our operations. In fact, the initial developer had incorporated protective clauses for neighboring agricultural use. A common practice when developing land near established farms, Karen's proposed special assessment needed the approval of 75% of the residents. And that support was disappearing faster than a puddle in the July sun. My federal training had informed me that numerous HOAs are unaware of their continuing legal duties stemming from the original development permits. When developers take shortcuts or declare bankruptcy, homeowners inherit issues they were never aware of. This is a problem that affects communities all over the country, costing them millions each year. Karen's supporters began to desert her like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Bryce Kellerman officially resigned from her Property Values Committee, stating concerns about agricultural easements and his own potential legal exposure for permit violations. Donna Hutchkins discreetly informed her neighbors that she had been misinformed about the legal intricacies and was returning to Phoenix. The situation reached a new height of absurdity when Karen tried to measure our fence with a surveyor's rod to document possible sightline violations. Our protective mother cow, Dolly, who had recently given birth, was not in the mood for strangers near her calf. Karen's scream was likely audible in the adjacent county as she bolted, leaving behind expensive equipment in the dust. "Boss?" Buck reported in a call, barely able to control his laughter. That woman was just run off by a mama cow defending her young. Even our animals find her to be a nuisance. Jake Morrison's initial article appeared in the local newspaper with the impact of a bombshell. Subdivision in environmental compliance crisis. The report detailed permit infringements, financial mismanagement, and legal duties that could financially ruin individual homeowners through special assessments. Karen understood that her own complaints had initiated the very investigation that now jeopardized her property value and financial security. Every noise violation she had recorded had become evidence that supported our ranch's long-standing operations. Every government agency she had reached out to was now examining her community's failures to comply. The county planning office declared an expedited review of the subdivision's permits. Set in motion by the sheer number of complaints Karen had submitted, environmental agencies began to raise questions about drainage systems, sound barriers, and buffer zones that should have been established years ago. Karen had invested months in an attempt to demonstrate that our ranch was unsuited for residential development. Instead, she had provided a perfect illustration of why agricultural protections are necessary and proved that her own subdivision was the actual source of the problem. The trap had been laid by her own hands. She simply hadn't realized she was caught in it. Sarah Olivia's title search struck gold on a Tuesday morning that altered the entire situation. I was sipping coffee while going over federal HOA compliance rules when she phoned with information that nearly made me spit out my drink. "Garrett, you have to come see this right now." The developer of the subdivision had neglected to submit the mandatory agricultural impact mitigation plan. The papers laid out on her oak conference table narrated a tale more compelling than any novel. The approval for Sagebrush Estates was contingent on several conditions. They were mandated to create a 200-foot buffer zone, erect sound-dampening barriers, and finish environmental compliance tasks valued at an estimated $340,000. The developer declared bankruptcy before completing any of these stipulations, thereby legally passing all responsibilities to the HOA. Karen's board was now accountable for every single compliance expense that the original developer had managed to evade. The balance of power had shifted as dramatically as tectonic plates. Each noise complaint Karen had registered served as evidence of our ranch's pre-existing rights. Every dust reading she had taken corroborated our historical activities. Every government agency she had contacted was now looking into why her own community had failed to meet its legal obligations. The irony was so rich you could almost taste it. During my federal training, I had been taught that developments receiving tax breaks or federal funds, such as Sagebrush Estates, are automatically subject to HOA oversight jurisdiction. Karen had been harassing the one individual in the nation empowered to investigate her community's regulatory shortcomings. Sarah's inquiry brought to light something even more detrimental. Karen's own house was in specific violation of the setback requirements outlined in the original permits. She had constructed her home just 50 feet from our property boundary, whereas the regulation stipulated a 200-foot distance. Her ideal home was, in effect, an unlawfully built structure. "It gets even better," Sarah went on, pushing another document toward me. "The subdivision's stormwater drainage system depends on the natural flow of water across your ranch land. The original permits explicitly state this reliance. Any interference with your operations could lead to widespread flooding in their community." Karen's position was now completely exposed. The property values she professed to be safeguarding would plummet if the county took enforcement measures that necessitated the compliance work. The special assessment required to finance these essential upgrades would amount to roughly $12,000 for each household. Funds that her community could not raise, and she certainly could not afford. I recalled my grandfather's wisdom on handling contentious neighbors. Sometimes, the most effective strategy is to let people ensnare themselves. Karen had invested months in creating a record that demonstrated our ranch's benefit to the region, while her own subdivision was the true source of the problem. The federal aspect of the situation made it all the more satisfying. As the regional oversight director, I possessed the authority to launch an investigation into HOAs that had neglected their development duties. I had the power to suggest state-level intervention if communities were unable to rectify permit violations. My forthcoming testimony before Congress could highlight Sagebrush Estates as a prime example of failures in HOA accountability. Sarah produced the last piece of the puzzle. Financial documents indicating that the subdivision's HOA had neglected to submit its mandatory annual reports for 2 years in a row. From a federal oversight perspective, they were functioning as an unmonitored organization while overseeing a development that had been constructed with the help of public tax benefits. Karen has no idea what she has set in motion, Sarah remarked, arranging the papers into organized piles. Every complaint she has lodged is to our advantage, she has documented. The reasons why your ranch should remain unchanged, while simultaneously proving that her community has broken multiple regulations. The wonderful truth became as clear as frost on a cold morning. I had no need to engage in a direct conflict with Karen. Her own conduct would compel her community to confront its real issues, leaving our ranch legally protected. She had unwittingly engineered her own downfall. Karen saw herself as David taking on Goliath. In reality, she was Goliath falling on his own sword, while David observed from a secure distance. The taste of justice was more delightful than Rita's apple pie and doubly. As gratifying, Karen's campaign of harassment had set off investigations that would either lead to the financial ruin of her community or compel them to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix problems they had long overlooked. My only task was to carry on with my normal ranch activities as Karen's precarious situation crumbled under the pressure of her own complaints. It was time to rally the troops. Sarah Olivia laid out legal papers on her conference table as if she were a general mapping out a military operation. Buck Henley came with 4 decades of ranch operation logs, establishing our historical claim down to the very day we first herded cattle along that contested road. Rita Sandoval made her diner available as a neutral territory for meetings and assured us of the finest coffee in 3 counties to keep our strategy sessions going. Marcus Webb from County Planning contributed the bureaucratic might, detailing the process of permit enforcement and consenting to fast-track the subdivision's compliance assessment. Jake Morrison from Channel 7 sought exclusive rights to our story as it developed. The man could sense a regional Emmy Award in the offing. Our 3-part plan took shape over Rita's famous chicken fried steak and potent black coffee that could revive the dead. The legal aspect was Sarah's responsibility. We would file a counter-complaint against the subdivision for its permit violations, demand that the county enforce the original development terms, and get the paperwork ready for my potential restraining order against Karen. As a final resort, I would prepare to launch a federal HOA compliance investigation, the ultimate measure that could bring their entire community governance to a halt. Sarah's inquiries had unearthed a fascinating detail about agricultural easements that I had learned from my grandfather but had never truly grasped. These protections are not mere guidelines. They are unbreakable legal safeguards that are tied to the land indefinitely. When developers construct new properties near existing farms, they are effectively acknowledging that agricultural practices have priority. You cannot purchase land adjacent to a functioning ranch and then insist that it ceases its operations. The community relations part of the plan demanded a more delicate approach. I worked with the Ranchers Association to present a united front at the forthcoming county meeting. We organized for longtime residents to give testimonials about our ranch's contributions to the community. Individuals who recalled my father providing aid during the '98 flood and my grandfather giving land for the volunteer fire department. Local businesses were already on our side. Marty Kowalski kept a record of how Karen's complaints were impacting his feed store clients. Dr. Sarah Martinez, our veterinarian, drafted statements on our exceptional standards of animal welfare. Even the postmaster volunteered to speak about our road's safety history. Not a single mail delivery mishap in 37 years. We scheduled a Heritage Day at the ranch to highlight our historical importance to the community. The aroma of barbecue and the strains of fiddle music would serve to illustrate the true meaning of authentic Western heritage, in contrast to Karen's sterile, suburban interpretation. The federal component was my area of expertise. During my time in Washington, I had learned that developments that receive any form of federal funding or tax incentives are automatically subject to an HOA oversight review. Sagebrush Estates had been the recipient of precisely such benefits, which meant they were liable to federal accountability standards that they had been disregarding for years. I compiled information on HOA compliance issues for my presentation to the Congressional Subcommittee, using our local predicament as a case study for problems in development oversight. The timing was impeccable. Lawmakers were in the process of creating more stringent HOA accountability regulations, and tangible, real-world examples are always more persuasive than abstract theories. My federal counterparts were particularly intrigued by the agricultural aspect. Many rural areas were experiencing similar strains from suburban sprawl, and our case had the potential to set legal precedents that would protect agricultural operations across the country. The economic case was strong. Our ranch contributed $180,000 each year to the local economy through purchases of feed, veterinary services, and equipment. Buck security camera footage proved to be indispensable evidence. We possessed recorded proof of Karen's daily harassment. Measuring our fences at sunrise, taking pictures of cattle through the slats, tailing our delivery trucks, and engaging in what can only be termed as agricultural espionage, the woman had transformed making neighborly complaints into a full-time job. Environmental impact studies revealed a wonderful irony. Our ranch's activities actually enhanced the local air quality and soil health when compared to high-density residential development. The subdivision's stormwater drainage system was reliant on the natural flow of water across our land. The original permits had acknowledged this connection, making our operations vital to their community's environmental compliance. During a strategy meeting at Rita's, all the elements came together with the precision of a finely tuned engine. Every hostile action Karen took only added to the evidence of her harassment. Her grievances to various agencies had merely hastened the regulatory review processes. Community backing was growing stronger as her methods became more and more outrageous. The perfect storm was on the horizon. The county planning department was set to address the subdivision's permit compliance issues. By the end of the month, the federal HOA Oversight office had scheduled compliance review visits in our area. The local newspaper had a feature story on agricultural heritage planned for the county's 150th anniversary. Jake Morrison's investigative report was slated to air during sweeps week, ensuring it would reach the largest possible audience. Sarah methodically arranged our legal paperwork. Buck organized demonstrations of historical ranch operations for the heritage celebration. Rita handled the logistics of community support. Marcus set the date for the decisive county meeting. Jake Morrison confirmed that his film crews would be available. Then, I received the phone call that brought everything into perfect alignment. The congressional subcommittee was asking for my testimony on failures in HOA oversight, with a particular focus on using local case studies. Karen's campaign of harassment had, without her intending it, given me a national stage to talk about the systemic issues that rural communities all over America are facing. The prospect of imminent victory was more delightful than Rita's renowned peach cobbler. Karen believed she was in a fight with a local rancher. In reality, she was up against federal housing regulations, state agricultural safeguards, county planning jurisdiction, and the solidarity of an entire community. All that was left for us to do was to let her continue to dig her own hole while we got ready to fill it in. Karen's desperation escalated to new heights of inventive self-sabotage. She made anonymous reports to the state veterinarian alleging animal abuse, apparently under the impression that well-cared-for cattle in clean fields amounted to cruelty. She reached out to the IRS with the suggestion that our ranch was a hobby farm, engaging in tax evasion. A preposterous accusation, given our track record of consistent profits and meticulous records that stretched back 3 generations. The woman's deep-seated suspicion led her to offer money to our seasonal employees in an attempt to turn them into spies. Buck learned of this from his nephew, Miguel, who works on the summer hay baling team. Miguel reported that Karen had come to him with $50 and a barrage of questions about our illegal activities. She asked if we were dumping chemicals into the stream or abusing the animals. Miguel recounted to Buck, with a shake of his head. I told her the only thing we dump is affection on those cows. And she stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. Her complaints became progressively more outlandish. Karen submitted grievances to the Postal Service concerning unsafe ranch road conditions that were supposedly affecting mail delivery. The very same road our mailman had been using without incident for 37 years. She used handheld gadgets to measure airborne dust, documenting air quality violations that were, in fact, nothing more than the Texas wind kicking up Texas soil. A small, dramatic turn occurred when Karen's husband finally broke. Under the weight of their financial troubles, Dave Whitmore had been keeping their dire circumstances a secret from his wife, but the escalating legal bills and her all-consuming fixation compelled him to confess. A moment that Buck's security cameras incidentally recorded through their open kitchen window. Karen, we're financially ruined. Dave's voice drifted through the evening air. We have $89,000 in outstanding California back taxes, liens, and legal judgments. We came here to escape, having our wages garnished. We can't afford a drop in our home's value or to be hit with HOA assessments. You need to put an end to this obsession. But Karen was too entrenched in her campaign to back down. Like a gambler who keeps raising the stakes on a losing hand, she had too much ego invested to simply walk away. My federal inquiry was moving forward, uncovering details that made Karen's grievances seem trivial in comparison. The HOA compliance assessment brought to light $127,000 in undocumented administrative spending over a 3-year period. The board president who served before Karen's tenure seemed to have misappropriated funds that were intended for infrastructure upkeep. This financial mismanagement meant that the HOA did not have the funds to address the permit violations. Even if they had been inclined to do so, they were, for all practical purposes, insolvent, yet they were confronted with hundreds of thousands of dollars in mandatory compliance expenses. Karen's media offensive continued to backfire in a grand fashion. She made an appearance on KTXS Talk Radio, where she contradicted her earlier claims about the timeline of our ranch, when she asserted that we had established our presence after the subdivision was built. The host, Jim Bradley, fact-checked her on the air using the county's property records. "Ma'am," Bradley stated, "the sound of shuffling papers audible. These documents indicate that the White Hawk Ranch was founded in 1887. Your subdivision received its approval in 2023. That's a gap of approximately 136 years." The callers were overwhelmingly in favor of our ranch and shared their own harrowing experiences with HOAs. The feeling of public support was more gratifying than the first cup of coffee on a chilly morning. Pressure from the community was building like thunderclouds before a storm. The residents of the subdivision began to receive official notices from the county regarding permit violations and the possibility of special assessments. Their insurance provider sent a letter threatening to terminate their coverage due to the development's non-compliance. 3 households decided to sell their homes rather than risk financial ruin. The HOA board convened an emergency meeting to debate stripping Karen of her leadership roles. Even her most steadfast allies were deserting her as the legal and financial ramifications became undeniable. Throughout this, I kept a strategically low profile, carrying on with my normal ranch duties while Karen spun a web of chaos around herself. My federal training had impressed upon me that the most effective way to manage volatile situations is with calm and unwavering consistency. Keep detailed records, provide factual responses when asked, but avoid any unnecessary escalation. Reports from environmental consultants came in and completely dismantled Karen's few remaining points. It was determined that our ranch's activities actually contributed to better local water table management through natural drainage. The subdivision's storm drainage system was dependent on this water flow across our land, a fact that was noted in the original development permits. Any attempt to remove or limit our operations could lead to widespread flooding in the subdivision during periods of heavy rain. Karen's complaints were now posing a threat to the very infrastructure that her community relied on for its fundamental safety. Her former supporters abandoned her more quickly than rats from a sinking ship. Bryce Kellerman officially stepped down from the Property Values Committee, expressing worries about legal exposure and the factual errors in their campaign. Donna Hutchkins relocated back to Phoenix, informing her neighbors that she was weary of the contrived turmoil and wanted to leave before the special assessments were levied. Only a single resident remained in Karen's corner, a newcomer who had not bothered to look into the legal details and was about to learn about the financial consequences of her allegiance. Karen's harassment intensified to a level that was genuinely alarming. She used her car to block our supply truck at the entrance to the subdivision, insisting on searching its contents as if she were a self-appointed Border Patrol agent. She used telephoto lenses to take pictures through the windows of our ranch house, documenting our family's daily life like a private eye. Most alarmingly, she began to follow me to town meetings, the feed store, and even Rita's diner, keeping me in her sights. As if she were a stalker compiling a case, when she went so far as to file a police report claiming our ranch dogs were a menace. Despite them being 200 yards away and securely contained, even the sheriff's deputy seemed chagrined. "Mr. White," Deputy Martinez stated, "I have now explained the agricultural protection laws to Mrs. Whitmore on 3 separate occasions. I am beginning to believe she should seek legal advice before she files any more complaints." The implication was unmistakable. Karen was verging on criminal harassment, and law enforcement's tolerance for her fabricated crises was wearing thin. Karen's final, desperate move exposed the full extent of her delusion. She engaged a private investigator to unearth any negative information about my federal employment, apparently convinced that a professional inquiry would reveal the corruption she was certain existed. She reached out to congressional representatives, alleging that a federal employee was abusing their power, and tried to rally a multi-county movement for agricultural reform, which garnered the support of exactly 0 people. Outside of her own subdivision, her crowdfunding effort said it all. The GoFundMe campaign to raise money for legal fees to combat government corruption brought in a meager $347 over 3 weeks, with most of the donations likely coming from relatives who contributed out of sympathy rather than conviction. The investigation she had paid for backfired as spectacularly as a malfunctioning firework. The private investigator found my impeccable federal service history, official praises for my community work, and a complete absence of any conflicts of interest. When the congressional staff investigated her claims, they discovered Karen's history of baseless lawsuits in several states and wrote off her accusations as the ramblings of a habitual complainer. The Federal Ethics Review gave me a full exoneration and even praised my volunteer efforts with agricultural preservation initiatives. Karen's credibility vanished like dew in the August sun. In the meantime, the crisis in the subdivision was spiraling into something worse than anyone could have imagined. The county delivered a formal compliance directive, giving them a 90-day window to rectify the permit violations or prepare for legal proceedings. The HOA board took a unanimous vote to strip Karen of all leadership roles, having come to the realization that she had become a liability that endangered everyone's financial well-being. The emergency special assessment was passed, amounting to $12,500 per household. Money that most of the residents did not have and could not secure loans for, given that their homes were depreciating daily. An additional 6 families put their properties on the market, saturating the local real estate scene and depressing prices even further. Karen's harassment morphed into classic stalking. She would trail my truck in her SUV, taking pictures while driving at an unsafe proximity. Buck security footage showed her parked just outside our property for extended periods, using binoculars to watch our comings and goings like some deranged wildlife enthusiast. She began to approach our customers and suppliers at the feed store, trying to undermine our business dealings with outlandish tales of illegal activities and government conspiracies. Marty Kowalski eventually had to ban her from his premises after she accused him of being part of an agricultural conspiracy. The woman even created fake online profiles to disseminate rumors about our ranch, posting convoluted theories about federal corruption and environmental crimes. The posts were so bizarre that most people thought they were satire accounts poking fun at extreme HOA members. Legal action was now unavoidable. Sarah Olivia submitted a petition for a restraining order, complete with a comprehensive file documenting Karen's escalating pattern of harassment. The sheriff's department suggested that criminal stalking charges be filed, based on her behavior which had progressed from complaints to surveillance and then to direct confrontations. The county attorney began to review our case for a potential criminal harassment charge. Judge Williams issued a temporary protective order that required Karen to maintain a distance of 500 yards from our ranch property, effectively cutting off her access to half of the county roads she had been using for her surveillance activities. Media coverage reached a fever pitch when Channel 7 broadcasted Jake Morrison's full investigative report. When HOAs Go Wrong, A Texas Tale, the program centered on failures in development permits, financial mismanagement, and legal duties that could lead to the bankruptcy of individual homeowners through special assessments. Morrison interviewed long-standing residents who spoke highly of our ranch's contributions to the community. When set against Karen's well-documented campaign of harassment, the report revealed not just a local dispute, but systemic issues with HOA accountability across the country. The national spotlight grew brighter when the congressional subcommittee set dates for hearings on HOA oversight reform. My testimony was set to feature sagebrush estates as a case study in regulatory breakdown, and the national media seized on the story as an illustration of rural-suburban conflict taken to an extreme. Federal housing authorities announced more stringent HOA compliance standards, partly as a result of our situation. Karen's local harassment had, without her intending it, sparked national conversations about development accountability. Her network of support completely disintegrated. Dave threatened to file for divorce if the harassment persisted. Their grown children cut off contact, mortified by her public antics and legal woes, and the few remaining neighbors either shunned her or contemplated their own legal recourse against her. The HOA's legal counsel advised the board to disassociate themselves from Karen's behavior to mitigate their own liability. She was utterly alone, financially devastated, legally imperiled, and socially exiled by the very community she had professed to be protecting. Our ranch operations proceeded as usual. Despite the surrounding turmoil, we successfully conducted school field trips that highlighted sustainable farming methods, were honored with the County Fair's Agricultural Heritage Award, and continued to be a significant economic contributor to the local area. Technical analyses confirmed what we had known for generations. Environmental impact studies demonstrated that our operations were beneficial to the local ecosystem. Water management reports proved that the subdivision was reliant on our drainage systems. And economic assessments calculated our annual contribution to the county's economy at $230,000. Karen's final attempt at a confrontation was a spectacular breach of the restraining order. She accosted me on the courthouse steps, asserting that I had destroyed her life through a government plot, all while the courthouse security cameras were recording every moment. "You have ruined my family?" she yelled, jabbing an accusatory finger as deputies began to move in. "You have used your federal authority to harass law-abiding homeowners." The irony was sublime, Karen being taken into custody for violating a restraining order while simultaneously accusing me of misusing power. Her booking photo was featured in the county newspaper right beside a story about our ranch being recognized for heritage preservation. Additional charges were brought against her for violating the restraining order and for criminal stalking. The very woman who had tried to get me arrested for trespassing on my own property was now looking at potential prison time for harassing a federal official. Justice was served, and it tasted sweeter than Rita's apple pie and was twice as fulfilling. The House Subcommittee on Housing and Community Development met in Austin on a Tuesday that would prove to be a game changer. With C-SPAN cameras broadcasting, I was sworn in as a witness, and our local dispute was elevated to a national dialogue on HOA accountability and the safeguarding of agriculture. "Mr. White Hawk," Congressman Martinez started, "could you please detail how the Sagebrush Estates situation serves as an example of the systemic weaknesses in HOA supervision?" The irony was exquisite. Karen had, without meaning to, handed me the ideal stage to talk about the issues that rural communities all over the country are facing, as I gave my testimony on failures in development permits and agricultural harassment. Millions of people watching learned how HOAs can undermine both property values and community cohesion through their regulatory shortcomings. Karen made an attempt to be present at the hearing, but was escorted out by Capitol Security for causing a disturbance with her shouted claims of government wrongdoing. Her removal was televised live, solidifying her image as a deranged extremist rather than a genuinely concerned citizen. The restraining order hearing, which took place in the same week, was a masterclass in legal repercussions. Karen chose to represent herself, a decision that is rarely advisable, and delivered rambling accusations about federal plots, while Judge Williams examined the chronological proof of her harassment campaign. Sarah Olivia presented security footage, police reports, and witness accounts with detached precision. The judge viewed videos of Karen measuring our fences at sunrise, taking pictures of cattle through the slats, and tailing my truck around town with clear intent of surveillance. "Mrs. Whitmore," Judge Williams declared, his voice imbued with the authority of 3 decades on the bench, "this court determines that your actions amount to a systematic harassment of legally operating agricultural enterprises. The evidence shows a distinct pattern of escalating misbehavior that poses a threat to public safety." The permanent restraining order was granted, increasing the protective distance to 1,000 yards. The criminal stalking charges were passed on to the district attorney. Karen was ordered to pay our court costs and legal fees. Money she did not have. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy hit its peak. National news vans were parked all around the square as Karen held an impromptu press conference that obliterated any shred of credibility she might have had left. She contradicted her own previous statements, asserted that I had control over the government, and blamed our ranch for the ruin of her family. The video clip became a viral sensation within hours. #HOA Karen began trending across the country, amassing 2-3 million views in its first 24 hours and serving as a cautionary tale of suburban arrogance and rural harassment. Late-night talk show hosts cracked jokes about measuring cow pats and calling the police on century-old ranches. My congressional testimony had an immediate and tangible effect on policy. The subcommittee took up my suggestions for reforming federal HOA oversight, which included enhanced protections for agricultural operations situated near residential areas. New regulations for monitoring development permit compliance were put in place to avert similar Karen incidents in the future. A federal grant program of $50 million for the preservation of agricultural heritage was established, directly influenced by our case. This program would assist family farms in withstanding the pressures of development while preserving the unique character of their communities. The county commissioners officially designated our ranch as an agricultural heritage site, providing it with an additional layer of state historical protection that Karen would be unable to contest. The local tourism authority initiated working ranch tours that featured our operation, which not only brought in extra income but also educated tourists on what genuine agricultural heritage entails. Property values in our vicinity actually rose as a result of the heritage status, directly contradicting Karen's ominous forecasts. Neighboring landowners expressed their gratitude to us for defending the rural character of the area against suburban expansion. Sagebrush Estates bore the brunt of some severe repercussions. The HOA was compelled to complete the necessary permit compliance work at a cost of $380,000, which led to special assessments that financially ruined 3 families and forced 6 others to sell their homes at substantial losses. Property values took a nosedive as the news of regulatory failures and financial mismanagement spread. The newly elected HOA board enacted stringent anti-harassment rules, acknowledging that Karen's actions had exposed the entire community to legal liability. They issued a public apology to our ranch and set up cooperative agreements for mutual advantage. Karen's personal decline was absolute. Her home went into foreclosure due to the mounting legal fees and outstanding California back taxes. Dave initiated divorce proceedings, stating irreconcilable differences, and sought restraining orders of his own. Their adult children severed all ties. Ashamed of her public conduct and legal woes, she left the state without providing a new address, leaving a wake of legal judgments and unpaid bills. The criminal stalking case went to trial, where she ultimately entered a guilty plea to evade a prison sentence. Federal policies were directly shaped by our predicament. New laws were passed that mandate HOAs to disclose all permit compliance duties to prospective home buyers. Agricultural protection regulations were reinforced in federal housing initiatives. Penalties for baseless complaints in harassment cases were significantly raised. Regional oversight directors were granted the power to investigate patterns of HOA misconduct, thereby preventing future campaigns of agricultural harassment. Our situation became the standard for resolving rural-suburban disputes across the nation. The ultimate mic drop moment occurred during my final television interview with Jake Morrison. When he inquired about Karen's legacy, I shared the final, delicious irony. She had never bothered to research the property she was purchasing. The agricultural easements were explicitly noted in the original disclosure papers. She had signed a document acknowledging the presence of agricultural activities when she bought her home. Her entire campaign of complaints was in direct violation of her own contractual obligations, the courthouse square filled with the laughter of supporters who had come to see the live interview. Karen's last television appearance concluded with her walking off the set in a huff after Morrison read aloud from her own signed property disclosure, which acknowledged the ranch's operations and agricultural easements. Justice had been delivered with a helping of poetic irony that would be talked about for years to come. 6 months down the line, life had found a new rhythm, one more pleasant than the honey from our own hives. Whitehawk Ranch was awarded the Century Farm status by the State Department of Agriculture, placing it among a select few family-run operations that have endured through many generations of change. Our educational initiatives now welcome over 2,000 students each year, imparting lessons on sustainable ranching to children who get to experience the scent of fresh hay and the sound of lowing cattle instead of traffic and sirens. Buck Henley received the promotion he had long deserved after 4 decades of dedicated work. Operations manager, with 2 new employees and a salary that at last reflected his true worth. The agritourism side of the business brings in an additional $180,000 per year, demonstrating that people are drawn to genuine agricultural heritage over sterile suburban ideals. Sagebrush Estates has undergone a complete transformation under a new leadership that values cooperation with its neighbors over contention. The yearly Ranch Heritage Day Festival now serves as a fundraiser for the County Historical Society, all while honoring the agricultural roots that are the foundation of our community. Property values have since stabilized at a 0.15% higher than they were before the dispute, as new buyers are attracted to the authentic rural way of life that Karen had attempted to dismantle. 3 new families have moved into our area specifically because of its proximity to agriculture, recognizing that working ranches are what give rural living its special character. The contrast with Karen's ideal is striking. People are looking for real heritage, not a polished suburban imitation. My testimony before Congress was instrumental in the passing of the HOA Accountability Act of 2025, a groundbreaking piece of legislation that mandates transparency in development responsibilities and provides stronger safeguards for agriculture. The federal grant program has financed 47 agricultural preservation initiatives in its inaugural year, shielding family farms from the threat of development across the country. Our case has become the go-to model for resolving rural-suburban disputes and is now studied in law schools and urban planning programs as a prime example of how community unity can overcome individual harassment. This model helps to prevent agricultural harassment while also protecting the property rights of all involved parties. Karen's story, however, is not as uplifting. She entered a guilty plea to criminal stalking charges and was given a probated sentence along with compulsory counseling for her harassing behavior. Her divorce was made final, with Dave retaining their few remaining assets. Karen relocated to Oregon without leaving a forwarding address and has since deleted all her social media profiles. She has become a cautionary figure in HOA management training seminars, a perfect illustration of how one person's obsession can bring ruin to an entire community. Real estate management firms now refer to Karen's Law as a colloquial term for regulations that prohibit the harassment of adjacent agricultural operations. The legal precedent set by our case has led to the strengthening of agricultural protection laws in 12 states. HOA insurance premiums have risen for communities with a high risk of harassment liability, thereby creating a financial motivation for fostering good neighborly conduct. Property disclosure rules have been broadened to include agricultural easements, which prevents future homeowners from feigning ignorance about rural activities. Educational outreach has thrived beyond our most optimistic projections. The Ranch's Scholarship Fund now awards $50,000 annually to students pursuing agricultural studies, many of whom come back to enrich our local farming community. Our collaboration with Texas A&M is generating research on sustainable ranching that is benefiting farms all over the Southwest. The expansion of the 4-H program now serves 340 rural youths in the region, providing them with education in livestock management, environmental conservation, and the business side of agriculture. Conservation easements are now in place to shield our ranch from any future development pressures, guaranteeing that these educational opportunities will be available for generations to come. The media impact has continued to expand. The documentary Fences and Neighbors has garnered awards at regional film festivals. My book, When HOAs Attack Agriculture, has become a top seller among rural landowners, and my speaking engagements have reached over 50,000 homeowners, discussing property rights and neighborly relations. The consulting firm I established has successfully mediated 23 similar rural-suburban disputes, averting costly lawsuits and community breakdown. Sometimes, the most effective solutions are found through mutual understanding rather than conflict. Personal joy has rounded out the picture. Sarah Olivia and I were married in a service held at the ranch chapel that my great-grandfather constructed, in the company of family, friends, and the very cattle that set this entire saga in motion. We have since adopted 2 children from the foster care system and are raising them on a working farm where they are learning about responsibility, respect, and the rewards of hard work. The increase in property tax income from heritage tourism is now supporting our county schools and public services. Local merchants have seen a 25% rise in agriculture-related business. Tourism contributes $400,000 annually to Millfield County, proving that genuine rural heritage fosters prosperity for all. Looking at the broader impact, the changes are enduring. The federal HOA reform is projected to prevent around 10,000 cases of harassment each year. The agricultural preservation grants are safeguarding 127,000 acres from unsuitable development, and rural-suburban mediation programs are resolving disputes before they can escalate into destructive litigation. As the setting sun bathes the sky in hues of orange and purple, I watch our children playing in the ranch yard while Sarah works in her vegetable garden. Tour buses are pulling in for the evening's educational sessions. The county sheriff gives a friendly wave as he drives by, and the cattle are grazing contentedly in fields that have sustained families for more than 100 years. At times, the most effective way to deal with a bully is to allow them to bring about their own downfall. Conducting thorough research on property rights before making a purchase can save everyone a lot of trouble down the line. A community begins to heal when its good people take a stand for what is right. Please share your own HOA horror stories in the comments section. Let's offer each other support. subscribe for more tales of David versus Goliath justice, and activate notifications if you are a believer in safeguarding our agricultural heritage. Next week, I'll be sharing how I used eminent domain laws to prevent a casino from demolishing my town's historic Main Street. That's it for this installment of HOA craziness. If seeing justice prevail has brightened your day, please hit that like button, leave your comments below, and ensure you are subscribed. There are more incredible neighborhood conflicts to come.